Thanks for listening to Fluff and Crunch, where we talk about the connection and sometimes disconnect between system, setting, and story in tabletop RPGs. Thank you as always for listening. This is part 2 of our 2-part overview of the new Marvel Superheroes game. Last week we talked about how the core mechanic works, the different pieces and parts of which characters are built, and the various types of powers available in the game. And here we pick up with maybe things you could do with the system, the existing rules, to customize and create your own powers. And then we finish our overview of the game, and Chris provides some feedback about what he thinks of it overall as a Supers game and also as a Marvel Supers game. You just made me think of this question. How easy would it be to create whole cloth new powers? Like if you thought of something that's not just taking necessarily, I mean, I guess you could, there's always reskinning and modifying, but how is there room for that? Do they have instructions for that? Or do you think it would be easy to do?
There's instructions in the book. They're pretty basic. I mean, the book covers a good chunk of stuff, but really what the book does is it kind of has a load of characters, and then it makes sure the powers are in there to cover it. But considering you have characters in there with magic and characters in there with psychic powers, it's covering a huge chunk of different powers. They also have kind of a miscellaneous one for like all of the powers that don't really fit into like big groups of powers that they've put by themselves. I don't think it would be that difficult. I think where it's hard is if you're like, well, I want a whole new power set. I want something which is so completely different to what's there. I need that. I mean, for example, when I wanted to do Batman, I wanted like a gadget power set. And then I realized actually I didn't want a gadget power set. A huge chunk of the stuff I wanted Batman to be able to do came under spider powers, because I wanted him to be able to glide, and I wanted him to be able to wall crawl, and I wanted him to be able to kind of swing on to things. And I realized those were all spider powers. So my Batman, the Batman I made up actually has spider powers. Now they're just reskinned. They're all like, it's just gadgets. And all the other thing I had to do is into his traits, I had to add the thing that said he was like his powers are based on technology, which is one of the traits you can have.
Okay. So what you're saying, what it sounds like is that you could, if you had some completely, seemingly novel idea, because there's enough in the book already, you think that reskinning or modifying that which wouldn't be that tough. Like there's enough to be inspired by or to just reuse.
I think that would be the easiest thing.
Okay.
I mean, like the other way I could have done some of Batman stuff is I could have given him like the elemental control abilities, and his elemental control would have been gadgets. But actually that didn't do the stuff I wanted it to do. But like if you wanted like, there's a bunch of different, under the elemental control, there's a whole bunch of different things you can do. So if you wanted to do Green Lantern, he would just take that and have like light control essentially. And if you wanted to do like, dark control, there's bound to be characters that the weird stuff they do isn't in here. But then this is the first book. So yeah, there are other superheroes, which does include every single power you want. They do at least give you some rules, but I mean, it's like I would think though with as many how to do it. It's not detail.
You said 130 pages of supers of different characters. Are they one per page?
Yes, they are. Okay. There are 130 different characters in.
And that's heroes and villains.
Yes, that is heroes.
Okay, so
there are way more heroes than villains, which I think
there should be
possible. Yeah, but I think if you think about it, it's one of those things that like, what's more useful for the players?
I guess.
For the GM, you actually want more bad guys.
It opens the door for them to make a bad guy book. But my reason for asking that was because the more examples you have of existing characters statted out, the more you have to work with. Do you like this? Forget about the original version. Forget about comparing it to the original version, because we know that was a dog. Do you like this?
Yeah, I do. I mean, like all of the stuff I didn't like. You said don't compare it, but essentially, when I got the original, I was like, I like the power set. I like how they've done actions. There's some really good things in here, but they've totally messed up all the maths, because now they've fixed all the maths. Every issue I had with it has kind of gone out the window. It's very quick and easy to play. Combat does not take long. I mean, nice. I ran a combat with 4 people who were playing characters that were like with quite a lot of powers, two of those were basically being played by 4-year-olds with their parents, like
Coaching
asking them
them.
what they want to do. And, you know, Mika and Annie, who aren't great at this kind of stuff, playing again, you know, quite a few. And we only played for like half an hour, and they fought, you know, like two groups of bad guys coming out of a bank. And then there was a car chase, and then the guys broke out of that. And it just didn't take long at all.
Superhero fights never take more than a page or two.
That was the thing. I mean, my initial worry was that the damages are going to be too high. Like, you're just going to be able to wiping out people too quickly. But actually, like, depending on the role, because the way it works, sometimes the mooks weren't going down with one punch. You might have to take them out twice. But it was just quick. Okay, and the different characters did feel different. You know, the web characters were having to swing through the streets, whereas Mika was like, well, how can I do that? And I was like, well, we had a slight issue when we realized that it's the comic book Miss Marvel, and Mika has seen the TV Miss Marvel, which is not the same.
No.
And we had to go, oh, right, yeah, Mika. Okay, yeah, your character doesn't have energy light powers. She gets stretchy and big hands. And she was like, oh, fine. So then she was playing a character who she didn't know who she was. And she was like, well, I would just grow tall and I'll run. And Annie's playing Squirrel Girl, and Annie's like, oh, well, I just realized I can't move as fast as them. We're like, well, either Miss Marvel can carry you, or, you know, so like, I think Miles was swinging along, carrying Squirrel Girl with her. And then like Annie's made up stuff, which isn't in her power. She's like, I want to summon the swarm of squirrels, which come along and attack the bad guys. And I'm like, okay, well, that sounds like an ego attack. So she's doing ego attacks against the bad guys. And, you know, it was very easy to just make stuff up.
Okay.
Because like the basic core rules are so
relatively
simple. It was easy to just go, this is what we're going to do. And so, yeah, it was, you know, it was, because I remember having said, like, because
and Squirrel Girl does have animal communication with squirrels.
Exactly, yeah.
So.
And also she has high ego, which made me think that's why it must be under that. Oh, no, yeah. So it just kind of worked. And the funny thing was, you know, I'd gone from saying, I can't run a game for all of you and 2 4-year-olds. That's completely unrealistic. Going, oh, actually, the basics of this Marvel system are so simple that, yes, there's all these powers. We don't need to worry about the powers. As long as I know that what the different powers do as the GM, it worked. I mean, it helped that 2 of the characters were spider characters and they had the exact same stuff.
I think one of the things about any game that's good, I mean, this is good, and I would like to see this in games in general, but I think it's especially important in a supers game, is that you have to be able to get creative with your powers. You can't have the powers be so defined that the mechanical description of the power limits creative use of it. Like, how many times have we seen Spider-Man use his web to, you know, goo someone to a wall, or a car to a fire hydrant so it like swings around and stop? I mean, you have to be able to get creative with it. And it sounds to me like the system is flexible enough that it enables a creative player to do those kinds of things, instead of saying, well, I read the description of my power and this is what the power does. And then you end up not being able to tell interesting stories because you're working off the rules, not the story.
I think if you had a completely bunch of rookie players and a rookie GM, and they went rules as written, I think they might potentially fall into that. But at the same time, that's almost more of a D&D mindset. I think a lot of people, when they pick up a game for the first time, just kind of, someone goes, well, can I do this? And the GMs, you know, hopefully it's one of those things. It's luck of the draw with a new GM to go, well, the rules say you can't, or actually, well, the rules don't say you can't do that. The rules just say this does this. Yeah, I don't see why not.
Right.
You know, I've GM'd enough that I know it's easy for me to go, yeah, fine. Or also, I've got better at playing with people that that don't know exactly what their characters can't and can't do. And they're purely gone the narrative to go, yeah, why not? Because it's more fun. You know,
I could see if you had rookie gamers who were Marvel fans, and a simple system would be more likely to experience those funky outcomes because they would be approaching it from the Marvel storytelling standpoint. And because the rules are simple and flexible, and as you said, they're not getting in their way, they would be able to do that.
I mean, that's kind of what the powers are doing. Someone like Rocket has got a bunch of different gun powers and engineer powers, and then so someone would be like, well, I want Rocket to shoot a really big gun. Well, he's got a power that lets him do that. I want him to shoot a lot of people. He's got a power that lets him do that. You know, the player could look into all their separate powers, but the reality is that a younger player, or someone who doesn't really get the rules, will just kind of, like you said, say,
can I do this? I want to do that.
Yeah.
And then
And
it's
the
incumbent upon
you
the
know,
person at the table who understands the rules enough
yeah.
to say, okay, this is how we'll use the rules to do that, instead of the opposite, as you look through the keyhole of the rules and your field of vision is restricted by those rules.
Yeah.
I think you've answered my last question.
Now there was another question which I asked you to ask, which you forgot.
What was that?
What's missing?
Oh, yeah, right. What's missing?
Well, obviously, apart from tons more characters, I
Tons
wish
more
there was
bad
more
guys.
bad.
Okay.
Yeah, I wish there was more bad guys, because it's that thing that,
That's
yes,
who's
there's
gonna.
loads.
Yeah, they're not gonna.
That's
The
who you're
good
going to
guys aren't
fight.
gonna fight good guys.
No. Well, unless you're doing civil war, but yes, the good guys are not going to fight good guys. Therefore, there's so it's particularly like Spider-Man. They've put in here, like, yeah, you've got Dr. Octopus and I think Green Goblin's in there,
Yeah,
maybe Vulture, but Spider-Man has a massive rogues gallery, and
yeah.
most of them aren't in it. Spider-Man's getting his own book though, and that's where they'll be. Likewise, there's hardly any X-Men bad guys. Well, there's an X-Men book coming. So yeah, the moment that you could do with way more bad guys. The other thing that's missing, and it didn't bother me at all, there aren't really rules for things like vehicles. Well, there's very basic, but there aren't rules for like making your own vehicle. There aren't moves for making a headquarters. There aren't rules for gadgets and stuff.
Okay.
But I've seen people complain about it online, and every time I've seen that, I've kind of thought, well, I can't think of many superhero role-playing games where that is in the core book.
Yeah.
Those are the kind, like Mutants and Masterminds has a whole book about gadgets.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things you always see in supplements. And at the end of the day, how much, do you want everything in this book? I mean, obviously some people do.
Look, I know this, that when it comes to publishing a physical book, every single page, especially in a book where they're committed to full color art and lots of it, every single page costs more money to create.
Yeah.
You're adding to the proofreading and layout burden. You're adding to the physical cost of the book. If you add 30 or 40 more pages, a box of 30 or 40 of these books being shipped somewhere, it becomes a weight issue. I mean, everything adds. And so I can see where, they say core books always sell the most. However, there are those call them like pockets where it's appropriate to say, like in Star Trek Adventures, there need to be obviously starship rules in the core rules. But if you really want to get fiddly with starships, that is enough of its own category that you have a book just for that. And so I could see here a book of gadgets, which would include vehicles and maybe lairs. Maybe books of more powers or more heroes of different categories. Like maybe they're going to come out with an Avengers book or an X-Men book.
Yeah, we know we're getting an X-Men and a Spider-Man book, and then we know there'll be new power sets in those to satisfy the extra characters in them. So, I think the core book's got a good chunk of stuff in it. It has got like in the combat section, it has got rules for like knocking people distances and through walls and destroying objects, which on the one hand is then that's probably like the more complex and nitty gritty of the rules in it. It almost feels like it shouldn't be in there for how simple the rest of it's trying to be.
Right.
But on the other hand, that is something people want. So I think it's one of those kind of rules. Look, if you don't want to do that kind of stuff, ignore it. And if you do want to do that kind of stuff, well, there's the rules for it.
Yeah.
Which is quite useful. And the other thing is, it's not so much missing, but originally when they did it, they kind of had more of an idea of how you could like level up a character, because you had all these sub ranks. So it was much easier to go, well, you're going to start at rank 10 and then we're going to rank up to rank like 15, but then you got these little, we've got rank 11, 12, 13, 14 in the middle, which will give us little power bumps. Whereas now, like if you go, right, my character's going to go from rank 3 to 4, it's a massive boost. But the thing is, to me, is I've said this so many times, I genuinely don't see that superhero characters level up. Some do, but I can think of, but it's a handful. You think, right, Nightwing's the best example. Nightwing went from, he was Robin,
and
then he's Nightwing.
Yeah.
So okay, but that's over sort of 50 years of real world time. He's gone from being Robin to being Nightwing. But you can count the characters that have done that on your hand, like Spider-Man, Peter Parker Spider-Man. Is has he really, like, everything that's changed in him is changed in his life. He's got married and then they reset reality and this person's died, but his powers haven't really changed. He still has basically the same costume. Yeah, for a while he had like an Iron Man suit,
whatever,
but now he doesn't. It's things like that. It's all story stuff. I wish they'd put in a bit more kind of about how they perceive it, because when they put it in, they weren't very clear about like, well, if you want to start at rank 2 and go, they kind of said, well, you can start one rank and go up to another rank. They weren't really clear about what that looks like. And what I suggested to people online is, look, if you're going to go from, say, you want to start at rank 2 and your ceiling's going to be rank 4, what you want to do in between is come up with ways of doing sub stuff. So instead of like, right, you're now rank 3, just give people 1 extra ability point this week. And then next week they can have an extra power, and just work out, because when you jump from one rank to another, you gain like a bunch more ability things, you get an extra trait. Just work out how many things there are between rank 3 and 4 and give the people that, like in piecemeal. But I wish that had been an option. But it's a very easy house rule.
But so what it sounds to me like what you're saying is that there are some things that you like to see, but none of them are must-haves. The game is entirely playable and workable as it is. If you want to push the boundaries, you're going to come up with other things or want to, but the game as it is, would you consider it to be complete enough as a single book starting off a line, hopefully?
Oh yeah, I mean totally, because the kind of stuff, the main thing that people have gone to do straight away is just create more characters, and I've created more characters very easily. I mean, one of the tests I always do for superhero games, very straightforward, is can you make Batman? Everyone said, can you make Batman in the game? Yeah, he was easy. I mean, I had to make him at rank 4, which is arguably stronger than he should be, but then I could have made like someone, I made someone go, well, you haven't given any tactics powers, and it's like, well, all right, to be fair, Batman only has tactics when he's in the Justice League. When he's out doing stuff by himself, he's not doing fancy, because he's by himself. He doesn't need any of that stuff. So I could have done a rank 5 Batman that's even more, but that's the level that he's up there with the Justice League fighting Darkseid or something. But I didn't. I put everything I wanted into it, and I'm like, and there's choices. I mean, at any time you make superhero characters, superhero role-playing games, there's always going to be someone go, I don't like the way they've made it.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, that goes with any game that's built off of an existing property is going to elicit that from people, because people are going to show up with different subjective interpretations of what is so and what is good, right, and true in that genre. And then on top of that, just preferences.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't made Superman, but generally you can often make Superman because, he just has all the powers.
Yeah.
So easy. But Batman's difficult because it's a normal dude, but that has all these cool gadgets.
Can do abnormal things.
Yeah, and a lot of games he doesn't work because maybe there's not an ability to basically, or you can't have gadgets, and so sometimes Batman just doesn't work. I mean, there's other characters I could do with making in this, but yeah, Batman came out. He's got some kick-ass martial arts, and I gave him a bunch of spider powers, and his stats are. That was the one problem I did have, is that I could have done with more stats, and I couldn't get any more points to do it with, but yeah, I did it.
So you like it?
I do, yeah. I mean, the funny thing, having read it and made a bunch of characters for it, and then I put them online, I was like, thanks for doing that. And then I was like, actually, I can't bother doing more this, because I was kind of writing them to be played. I was writing them for the sake of writing them to go onto the blog, and now I'm like, I'm past that now. I don't need to do that anymore. The thing I came back to is like, actually, this is great. If I want to sit down and play a role-playing session with Mika and Annie, we can play this easy peasy. There's already characters ready to go. I can come up with superhero adventures, like that, super easy. The only reason I'm not playing it with, say, Scott and Brian, is the thing I've already said to you a bunch of times at this point, that I don't think superhero games work in campaigns overly well.
No.
I think they're better as one-shots, with the exception of. With the exception of like the X-Men, if you've got about 10 players and you're going to play it as a soap opera, but I've got 2 players and it ain't going to work. Like, there's not a lot of family strife type dynamics when there's 2 of you.
Yeah.
So,
well, but then it makes it a game that you can use as a palate cleanser. It makes it a game that you can create characters for. I mean, you could sit down with Scott and Brian and come up with your own, instead of like the X-Men, like the R dudes or something like that. You come up with your own little superhero group, make the heroes in it, and then periodically pick those up, different ones or whatever, and play it, as I said, as a palate cleanser, as something to do between longer running campaigns or when you want to break. And then it works really well for a couple of sessions. But the other thing with that too is if you're going to have a game that you're going to say, hey, this is a cool thing that I can use for that, and it works very well with those short-term things, you definitely don't want a complicated system, because if you only come to it for a couple of sessions every few months, if that's how you approach it, you don't want to, oh crap, do you remember how, you don't want to deal with that. It's got to be a simple system you can pick up and just go. It sounds like that's what they've done here. I
Yeah.
like the fact that, you were, let's just say you were annoyed at the first iteration of this, or the first version of this, and it sounds to me like they have done a really good job in either, well, they've done a really good job fixing that which was broken, and either that is from directly responding to the complaints of the community, or just realizing internally these things are a problem, and that the designers sat down and fixed them. That's terrific. I like that.
I do. There was a big worry, I remember, right at the start when, we had this play test, and it was a complete mess. The game, there was people going, it's not unplayable. That game was unplayable. It did not work. It didn't do what you needed it to do, except under very specific circumstances.
They fixed it.
And, we gave feedback, and like they sort of released some initial, and the initial versions kind of made little fixes, and it felt like they were just kind of tinkering at the edges. But eventually it started to look like, no, they are reading this feedback and they are doing it. And the final book, I mean, almost all of the kind of issues I had with it are fixed. I mean,
that's great.
The only real issue I have with the game now is that it doesn't have a PDF, which is, a pain.
That's pretty minor.
I know, it's just I mean, like, it doesn't actually. I have a Kindle version which I can use. There's this website thing which actually is quite handy, because, like, for looking things up, it's super useful. I can go to a character, and if I just highlight the power, it pops up a little box out of that power.
Is this something that you need some kind of like access to?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, that wasn't free, but it's it's handy to run that. And then there's like a Roll20 version of it, which looks like that's meant to be quite good. And I know that's actually on sale. I'm going to say at the moment, but by the time this releases, it won't be anymore. No. So yeah, they've done a lot of digital stuff. I just find it really weird that they haven't done a PDF. But
well, I mean, maybe they perceive it as being a way that the thing will get out there and end up getting pirated and misused.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but yeah, that's a bit odd. But yeah, I mean, I like it. There is, like I said, there's a whole bunch of powers I haven't even like scratched the surface of, and I haven't read in detail the narrator chapter, which is, there's
I said,
quite a lot of stuff in it.
A book of powers makes sense. That totally makes sense for a supers game. Yeah. Just like a book of ships or a book of weapons for like a science fiction game. Totally makes sense. Well, that's cool. I'm glad. I don't like it. I don't like to hear about failure or failure and misuse because of like stupidity, complacency, or arrogance. I like it when feedback is taken and that you end up getting you get a better product that maybe more people will be able to enjoy. And it sounds like that's what they've done here. That's very cool.
I mean, I hope it takes off and does well, because obviously the last Marvel game is famous for having like just gotten started, everyone loved it, and then it died.
Yeah.
Before it even got going. I hope that doesn't happen to this. I think my kind of worry is there was a lot of people that looked at the play test and went, this system is awful. And then that was it. They just gave up on it.
Here's what we'll do. We will spread this far and wide, and we will flip we'll turn the tide on that narrative, or do our part to do so.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I mean, yeah, it's a decent superheroes game. It's not, calling it the best superheroes game is silly, because the problem with, like, Mutant and Mastermind's an amazing superheroes game, which has massive problems, because to get a really good, to make the exact character you want, the problem is that it takes a lot of effort.
The trouble though is the trouble with any, like saying science fiction, there's not just one kind of science fiction. Like Star Wars is different from Star Trek, which is very different from Traveler, which is very, there's all different kinds of fantasy. So the idea of there being a best superheroes game is like, well, what kind of superheroes? The best superheroes game is the one that you're enjoying the most, the one that works for you and that you enjoy the most. So,
I mean, I'm always kind of a fan of,
like this is good.
The thing I like about a Marvel game is I want it to have the characters I'm used to playing. This has got, it's got all of the Guardians of the Galaxy. It's got a whole bunch of the new, like, it's got people like Miss Marvel and Miles Morales that have only been created in the last 10 years. they don't exist in Marvel Heroic. They don't exist in the old. Yeah, you could look at the verse. Someone's knocked up, but it's nice to have the game with all of the new stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Even if all the X-Men stuff is already wrong because they did a big X-Men change and then they literally went back on it as the book released.
It was, it was right when they printed it or right when they worked it up. Whatever.
But I imagine when the X-Men book comes out, I don't know what they're going to do for that, but that'll be interesting to see.
Cool. I'm glad to hear it, man. This is good. I hope that this is helpful to you folks listening. If you were on the fence about this, or if you'd come away from that initial playtest with a terribly bad taste in your mouth, and that you go give this thing a second look.
Yeah, if you can get hold of it.
Oh yeah, well that's another issue. That's not on us.
Yeah, because actually getting it in print was a pain as well. I couldn't find it.
Lovely.
All
right,
but yeah, it's good.
Excellent, man. I'm glad that this works out. Thank you so much for listening. You can visit our show's homepage at anchor.fm/fluffncrunch. That's FLUFFNCRUNCH. We would really appreciate feedback and reviews on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to this on. Thanks so much.